How many wins would it take for Dennis Allen to keep his job for another season? I know it's early. I know it's just this summer, but I think this is a question we'd have to ask as early as today. And we're going to do that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Lawyers. You've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore, Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Dennis Allen's tenure in New Orleans has been literally the definition of mediocre. There's nothing exciting about this team. They play a pretty bland style of football. And over the first two seasons, it's been a 7-10 record, followed by 9-8. So to put it total, 16-18 in those two seasons. And the biggest takeaway I could say is they are not competitive enough when it matters most. And what I mean by that is the Saints finished last season really strong, but the playoff push for it, it's always relying on someone else to lose and someone else to do a favor for your team. And the way I look at the NFL is you have to worry about your business, and you got to put yourself in a position where if you take care of that game, you're in. You cannot rely on other teams in the NFL. And yet the last three seasons, one including Sean Payton as the head coach back in 2021, the Saints have been in this position going into the final week of the season where they need everything to break the right way and they need to take care of business and also hope a couple of other teams win. And I don't want the Saints to be in that position anymore. And it's very frustrating because it almost feels like had you not been in that spot and had you been completely out of the mix, then maybe a change would be made. But here you go into year three of Dennis Allen. And while I'm not thrilled about year three being a thing for Dennis Allen, I understand that there is no turning back. This is the choice they made. And I hope that he proves me wrong. And I hope he has a great year. But he needs to, because I don't want to hear another year four if there isn't. So for Dennis Allen, what is it going to take? I think from New Orleans' perspective, it's a little different. I know Saints fans don't want to hear this, and I sure as hell don't want to hear what's about to come out of my mouth, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't think the Saints are operating under if Dennis Allen misses the playoffs, he's fired as the head coach. I don't think they view it that way. I think they view some type of Candyland version of saying, hey, if we show some progression and we win certain games and we're fighting for the division, that's good enough, because I think that the Saints have kind of been married to the idea of being just competitive. Not great, not a playoff team, competitive. They value continuity. So I don't think it's playoff or bust. For me, though, the way I look at this season for Dennis Allen, if he can't win 10 games, he should not be brought back. And why I picked 10? Well, you want to have improvement from last year. And he won 9 games last year, technically. So at least give me one more win. Get yourself to 10-7. And if the Saints go 10-7 this fall, that means they would have beat some pretty good opponents, right? They have the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Eagles, the Browns, the Rams. Got a lot of good teams on the schedule. And you're not even talking about the division, which is still up for grabs. It's probably the weakest division in all football still. So I think for New Orleans, that's what I'm looking at for starters. Can you get to 10 wins? Dennis Allen's never done it before in his career. That's something I'm looking at. Another thing that I'm going to look at if I'm the Saints, because they're so big on, progression and seeing this and that. Can the Saints avoid another slow start? If you go to Dennis Allen's first year as a head coach, the Saints were 4-9 before finishing the season 7-10. This past season, the Saints were 5-7 before finishing the season 9-8. And yes, it's great to finish the season on a high note. It's good to win 4 out of the last 5 games and whatnot, which the Saints have been doing 2 years in a row. And again, you tip their cap for not losing the locker room and continuing the fight. And I understand that. But as Saints fans, it is getting a little annoying going into November, knowing that your team is below 500, that they need everything to break to go the right way to make the playoffs. It's a bit depressing, and it's becoming too much of a repetitive theme. And again, it's not just on Dennis Allen. This was the case for the Saints in the final year under Sean Payton. They made a late run, but it wasn't enough because they needed someone else to win that weekend, the final week of the season, and it didn't happen. So for New Orleans, you got to see progression. I understand that. And I know the Saints are going to do that. But for once, I think there should be some type of prerequisite. There should be some type of number that Dennis Allen has to hit. Because if not, then what kind of culture are you establishing? Because the Saints are big on culture. And I get that. And I am not a believer in tanking in the NFL. Guys do not want to lose. There's too much pride. They put their bodies on the line. They're not putting their bodies on the line to purposely lose a game. There's no way that's going to happen in the NFL. It just doesn't happen. But I think the Saints have to be very careful, because if they have another mediocre year and bring Dennis Allen back for a fourth season, then what are you sending to the other teams out there? It's okay to just consistently be 7 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, and not getting anything of significance done. I don't think Todd Bowles is a great coach, but Todd Bowles just took the Buccaneers to the playoffs, and he earned himself another year. Dennis Allen's been here for 2 years. Like I said, he's won 16 games in those 2 years. So not good, not bad, literally smack in the middle, but nothing to show for it in the worst division in football. So if he has another bite at the apple and he can't get it done, I think the Saints have to make a change, and I'll be very, very vocal about that. As you guys know, I always am. I always am when it comes to Dennis Allen. But I'm willing to give him another year to prove me wrong. It doesn't mean I've changed my opinion on him. I don't think Dennis Allen's a good head coach. I don't think my opinion on him will ever change. But I am more than willing to give him another year for him to try and prove me wrong. And I hope he does, because I'd rather the Saints be relevant and me look like a dumbass than the Saints stink and me go, oh, look at this. I got this prediction right. I don't want any of that. I'd rather the Saints be good and I look like an absolute jackass. That's my preferred choice out of the two. But when it comes to DA, there really needs to be some type of expectation set, because I think the way the Saints are looking at it right now is that they're content with what they're doing. And I think that's a joke, because a year ago you made these win now moves, and then this year the Saints dialed it back. So did you admit that you made a mistake with all these win now moves? And if so, what was the mistake? Was it signing Derek Carr? Was it believing in Dennis Allen? Are you pinning it all on the OC? Well, you got him a new offensive coordinator this year. You went from Pete Carmichael to Clint Kubiak. So if Dennis Allen got his OC of his choice, he got his quarterback of his choice, yeah, the defense isn't loaded like it's been in years past, but it's still adequate. There's still enough playmakers, and I think DA coaches the defense well enough that I'm not really worried about that side of the ball. So what is going to be the excuse? Are you going to pin it on the O-line? Well, they've drafted O-linemen. Fuaga first round, Penning first round, McCoy second round, Ruiz first round. The Saints invest in the O-line. They're not hitting. What would that come down to? That would either come down to coaching or scouting, or maybe a little bit of both. So there's got to be a lot of self-reflection after this season if it doesn't go well for the Saints. And again, it's only July. The Saints are going to have plenty of opportunities to prove everyone wrong, including myself, and I hope they do. But the way I look at this team right now, I think the Saints are kind of in the same position. I think they're a 7 to 8 win team. I think that the way their schedule is positioned, they could start out slow out of the gates, and could that be the death blow for them? Possibly. So I think that's going to be really fascinating to see how they handle that early slate. And if this season plays out exactly like the last two have, where they start slow, finish strong, don't have playoffs to show for it. And then what do you do if you're Mickey Loomis, if 3 years in a row under Dennis Allen, 4 years if we add the last year of Sean Payton, the Saints are just doing the same old shtick where they're not getting much done. And they're very much a middle of the pack team with not that bright of a future. You got to make a change. You would have to reset the culture. And I'm fascinated to see how this plays out. Like I said, guys, again, I want to be proven wrong. And unfortunately, as it stands, I don't think it's playoff or bust for Dennis Allen. I don't think it's that way. I don't think the Saints made enough moves to tell him, hey, it's playoff or bust. Last year should have been. It wasn't. Why would this year be when they scaled back their moves? So I'm worried about the expectations set from within. But as a fan, just from a fan standpoint here, I think if he goes under 10 wins, which I think is likely because the Saints do have a pretty rough schedule, especially the first half of the year. I mean, there is a point where you're going through the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Chiefs. Like, it's going to be a gauntlet for a little bit. I am very fascinated to see how this plays out, but get to 10 wins, man. Get to 10 wins, because you've started the last 2 seasons 4-9, 5-7. You've clawed back. You've shown some fight, but you have no playoff appearance to show for it. And in 5 years of being a head coach, Dennis Allen's never made the playoffs. Is the 6th try the lucky number? I guess we'll find out. But I'm fascinated to see how this season plays out for sure. Like I said, I hope I'm proven wrong. But as it stands today, I do not think he is the guy to get the job done. And that should be a problem for the Saints. And if he's unable to get them to 10 wins, he's unable to get them to the playoffs, got to make a change. 4 straight seasons of no playoffs would be unacceptable for a team that really, from the 2010s, set the bar of being a perennial playoff team for the most part. Let's take out that 3-year rough patch of the 32nd ranked defense. But outside of that, obviously a contender almost year in, year out under Sean Payton. So what do you guys think about Dennis Allen? What is a fair number of wins that he can reach, or I'd say, let's say goals that you'd like him to reach, where you finish the season and you say, you know what, he should get another year? Because as it stands right now, I know a lot of Saints fans are kind of fed up with the coaching staff situation, and the optimism that we have to look forward to obviously stems around Clint Kubiak and whether or not he can fix the offense. But again, it all rides on the head coach. Your play callers can be great. If your head coach is not great, it's really tough to overcome that. So we'll see what happens with DA. Let me know in the comment section below what is the fair number of wins you believe he has to hit to avoid being on the hot seat or avoid being fired. And I'll get back to you. Until then, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.